in the economy field in South Africa. Dawie is one of South Africa's most respected economists, a chief economist, director, and leading voice in understanding the complexities of our economy. Dawie, it's a great honor. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Thank you.
You've spent decades analyzing the economy. What first drew you the economics?
I always make the joke that it was the only subject I could pass. And I also quite often say that I didn't discover economics discovered me. But thinking about where I am today in my life and my career so far, I realized that I've always been interested in economics. And I've always been an economist. In fact, I think we are all economists. And and economics, people think economics is about numbers and graphs and formulas, but that's not the case. Economics is primarily about people. And if you want to understand people better, you can become a psychiatrist, for example, or you can become an economist. And it's pretty much the same thing. Economists only look at trying to understand why people do certain things, and a very good example is our markets. Markets is a place where people get together and they interact with one another, and the result of that typically is that things will be exchanged and prices will be determined for things. But there are other markets. There's a market for marriage, for example, where people get married, and that's nothing but it's nothing but an economic decision to get married. There are many other markets. Economists even measure things like, for example, happiness. So, and what drew me to economics in the end, and I only realized it a little bit later, is that actually I'm interested in people. And economics is one way of trying to understand people a little bit better. And only later in life did I really discover that economics is not about graphs and those things, but it is about people. And I realized today that I've always been interested in people and why people do certain things and why people believe in certain things. So I guess it's my interest in people that draw me to economics.
No, thank you very much, Dawie. It's a very compelling answer. And I always believe that everyone has got a story, and you need to understand that person's story to understand their perceptions and how they interpret things, which is very important. So I want to ask you basically, what do you think, according to your own opinion, is the biggest challenges South Africa is facing right now economically?
Again, let me repeat what I said. Economics is about people. And the biggest challenge, in my view, that South Africa faces at the moment, remember, I can give you an economic answer to this. I can tell you we have to save more and we have to invest more and we have to be more productive and we have to do A, B, and C. I can give you those, and I can give it to you if you want to. But the question really is, we need to ask this question: why is the economy not growing? And and I believe that economies want to grow. I believe that's what economies do. They grow. So in the case of South Africa, the economy is not growing. So clearly we're doing something to prevent the economy from growing. And I think that is where the biggest challenge is. What are those obstacles in the way of preventing this economy from growing? And the single biggest obstacle that I see is government, especially the ANC. That is the biggest obstacle and the biggest challenge that we have in South Africa, because their policies are wrong. Their ideology is wrong. They are incompetent quite often. They are corrupt quite often. All those things are bad. It's bad for an economy and it's bad for government to be that, because government is a significant player in the economy. The state is the biggest single player in the economy. And if you've got the biggest player doing the wrong things, then obviously the economy will suffer. So my answer so what is the biggest challenge? Is politics. We have to get rid of the ANC, because they are part of the problem. They're certainly not going to be part of the solution. The ANC caused this horrible damage to the South African economy at various levels. And I can give you examples of what they've done, but we all know this: corruption, infrastructure, law and order, collapsing local authorities, Eskom, I mean, just name it. Whatever they touch, they basically damaged or destroyed in many instances. So no, that's our biggest economic problem in South Africa, and that's the ANC.
The examples I want to give you is in Australia, where you've got something like a national autism strategy, where where governments basically plan. They've got this implementation of the national autism strategy where they support families and neurodiverse individuals as well. And one of the interesting facts, a former South African who's actually a close friend of mine, he actually he's in Tasmania, and he's part of the focus group of the national planning of the national yearly planning, and he mentioned that the that Australia, they budget every year 140 billion Australian dollars only for disabilities alone, which is a massive thing, and that includes social grants, but specifically for disabilities. So it's very interesting as well. So I want to ask you, are you optimistic as you are? Because look, you're a well-respected person. You speak all over the radio. You are one of the most respected persons currently in the field of economics. Are you optimistic about South Africa's economic future? Why and why not, if you may?
Am I optimistic about South Africa's economic future? Well, I'm afraid in the short term, my short-term view for the economy is not very good. And it's not only the ANC. The war in the Middle East will have a huge impact on the South African economy as well. So I'm afraid over the next couple of months and perhaps a year or two, the South African economy will continue to suffer because of what's happening in the Middle East, but also because of domestically created challenges, basically. But like I've said, our problem in South Africa is politics, and there I am a little bit more optimistic. And because clearly we are getting rid of the ANC. The ANC is on the back foot, losing a lot of support. And many of their policies are being challenged in the courts and at various other levels. So I think many of the wrong macroeconomic policies implemented by the ANC will become something of the past soon, simply because some of these things are just not implementable. So from that point of view, I'm actually quite optimistic in that that we are changing the political landscape in South Africa, and that will create a better economic future for South Africa. So I'm cautiously optimistic on a medium longer term for South Africa. Something else that I'm actually a little bit worried about, and that has to do with the region in which we are, and that is Africa. And it's a poor region. And there are many challenges in Sub-Saharan Africa, and we're part of Sub-Saharan Africa. And looking north of South Africa, I do not see many. There are some exceptions, but I do not see many successful countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. There are a few, and it doesn't mean that can't happen. It certainly can happen. If there's one country that can really make a difference, it certainly is South Africa. But we have to understand that the region in which where we find ourselves is a challenging region, and it's where the challenges that many of the countries in Sub-Saharan Africa are faced with can quite easily become challenges for South Africa as well.
Yeah, definitely. I think being in a third world country with a lot of influences, affects everything as well. It affects the support that you get, especially from a government's perspective. It plays a part. Now, you talked about the global trends, right? And you referred to the specific situation where we're currently at in the world. So, Luke, you've been studying this for quite a while. How are global economic shifts like inflation, this war that's currently going on, and AI, for instance, impacting South Africa?
Yeah, South Africa is a small open economy, and I referred to the oil price and the conflict in the Middle East just now, but it's a small open economy, and that means that South Africa will be affected by whatever happens internationally. In many cases, it will be more vulnerable than many other countries. Our huge dependency on the importation of oil or petroleum products is one example of that. But the fact that South Africa is the most advanced economy on the African continent also means that we are very much connected with the rest of the world. Our financial industry or financial system is a very good example of that. So if something happens internationally, quite often we will see the rand reacting to that or the local interest rates reacting to that. So South Africa is very, very vulnerable to international developments. And the recent example is, for example, what's happening in the Middle East. That will have a negative impact on inflation in South Africa, put inflation rate up or push inflation up and interest rates with that and that sort of thing. But of course, there's a benefit of being a small open economy, and the benefits are that when things are going well, huge amounts of money can quite easily, and certainly huge amounts of money certainly do flow into South Africa, into the financial markets with all sort of benefits. So South Africa being a small open economy is very vulnerable to international developments, but are also can easily benefit from positive international developments as well.
Thank you. I want to ask you, which is very important, everyday impact, especially when you look particularly at where we are currently in. Look, many people are struggling. It's tough out there. When you think about unemployment, referring to neurodiversity in my field, we've got the highest unemployment rate of neurodiverse individuals in the world based on the research that I'm currently doing. Davi, I wanted to share with you, we've got the highest suicide rate of neurodiverse individuals in the world as well. The living age of a neurodiverse person in South Africa is
Just explain to me, what is a neurodiverse person?
Thank you very much. Neurodiversity refers to individual. Look, this neurodiversity refers to, it's a different brain type, basically, when you refer to an individual who's got different comorbid conditions like autism, ADHD, and we class them under one umbrella concept.
Okay. And people that think different than the norm, I guess.
Yes, exactly. And let's face it, it's basically individuals that are your most intelligent people in the world as well, that contribute towards society in their own unique way. But look, referring to that, the living age is 35 years old due to depression, suicide, and because these individuals do not have a purpose. So I want to ask you, when you refer to the unemployment and cost of living, what would you say to the average South African right now?
If you refer to the cost of living, was that the question?
That's it, yes.
Yeah, well, the average South African, there's a saying that if you put your feet in the oven, you put your head in the deep freeze, then on average you are okay. And that the reason why I mention that is because there is no such thing as an average South African. We're all different. But if you force somebody into an average somehow, then the average South African in South Africa are poor. The average South African have been getting poorer the past 10 years. Every second average South African is actually unemployed. The average South African's got high levels of debt. The average South African could always face this threat of violence and criminality. The average South African suffers because of very weak levels of skills development, very weak state support at various levels, the police, whatever, infrastructure, whatever you want to manage. So yes, the average South African is not having a very good time. It doesn't mean that we are not better off today than in the past. Certainly, we are much better off today than 30 years ago. But I did mention earlier that economies want to grow. Economies want to get bigger. Economies get wealthier. You just have to give them free rein and a couple of other things, and economies will grow, which hasn't been happening in South Africa especially the past 10 or 15 years. So yes, to the average South African out there, I am pretty sure that the average South African will again be getting poorer over the next year and probably the next 2 years. And the average South African will experience more and higher levels of unemployment and poverty in the country. And what I'm particularly concerned about is that we've got rising levels of absolute poverty. Absolute poverty simply means that people go to bed hungry. And we even have many cases of children literally dying of hunger. Something like 25% of our kids in South Africa are stunted because of malnutrition. And if you started because of malnutrition, then it means that it's going to be very difficult for you to acquire the necessary skills to be part of a modern economy, because you can't learn optimally, because your brain hasn't developed optimally. So I'm afraid the next couple of months and maybe even longer in South Africa is going to be very, very difficult for the average South African. But of course, there are many South Africans that are that's got a much worse life. You all only have to drive through the big cities and see all the squatter camps. Now, just imagine what it's like to stay in one of those squatter camps and how people are suffering there. And a small increase in the price of bread will have a dramatic impact on their chances of surviving, literally, quite literally. While in the other hand, we have some very, very skilled South Africans that's got an amazingly comfortable life, a very, very high living standard. And for them, an increase in the price of bread, I mean, they don't even notice that. So for them, life will go on as usual. In many cases, people will become even more affluent because of their skills and because of the access to capital and things like that. But for the average South African, and especially the poorer South Africans, the cost of living is likely to turn for the worse.
It's reality. It's reality that we are confronted with on a daily basis. So something that you said interesting, you talked about the stories, the personal reflections. Now, I want to ask you, what if after everything that you've seen and experienced, who has or what has economics taught you about people?
Economics taught me a lot of things about people now. What is that complicated word that you just taught me?
Neurodiversity.
Neurodiversity, I must remember that. Yeah, economics taught me a lot of things. I've learned a number of lessons. One is that I believe people are inherently good. People are good. Another thing that I've learned is that people, we all aspire to the same things. We all want the same things. People want to be safe. People want to live in a comfortable environment. People want to eat well. And people want to trust other people. People are inherently good. I think that's the single most important thing that I've learned. What I mean by that, you refer to neurodiverse individuals, and I guess in that category of people are people that are probably for which it's very, very difficult to adapt in a modern economy or in society, generally speaking. And imagine what happened to that people in the past without the modern knowledge that we have today. I mean, life certainly was much more difficult than what it is today. And it is because of technology and more understanding of those conditions and things like that. But do you know that in the past, people gave a much bigger chunk of their income for welfare than what they give today? A much bigger chunk. So people in the past, the state, you refer to the Australian government. Today, the state is responsible for many things like education and health services and all that sort of stuff. But in the past, the private sector provided all of that. And the private sector, it was not only for the rich guys, it was basically for everybody. The rich, the affluent part of society contributed to welfare at many, many levels. And there are so many examples of that. The point I want to make, I think perhaps what we need to understand is that if you remove the state out of the economy, and if you remove the state from certain social services that they provide at the moment, don't think that's going to come to an end. The private sector will contribute and will continue to contribute to various good causes. And may I add, that R1 that it will be contributed from the private sector and under control of the private sector will be used significantly better than the R1 spent by the state on all expenditures items, for example. So yes, although the state spends much more on social support today, the quality of that support has deteriorated quite significantly. And if the state ever should stop doing that, don't think that service will come to an end. The private sector will step into that void and provide those services, because that's what history teaches us.
people adapted to the times. You know, people, there's more research coming out, people sharing their stories. Um, you know, and compared to people that were diagnosed, for instance, in the late 70s, 80s, you got the thing called the Rain Man effect, based on the film Rain Man, where people thought that autistic people would act the same way as that or specific Rain Man character, like being good with maths, not making eye contact. Although there's certain similarities, but that was how autism looked like, particularly for those individuals. And now suddenly we are referring now, based on the human rights movement that occurred the past 30 or 40 years, that have developed over the years. We are referring now that each individual is different. So it's very, very, very interesting. I want to ask you two more questions, and one of those questions are, if you could give advice for young people in South Africa, what would that be?
Well, advice to young people, I guess this is a kind of economic question. Now, I've been I've been trying to understand economics, and I'm still every day I learn more and more about it. I mean, I understand today that how little I know. And just by the way, I myself have been diagnosed with certain neurodiverse characteristics, if you like. Uh, um, okay, what's my advice to young people? Well, if that's an economic question, we have to understand that economics today is becoming more technologically driven. There's nothing new to that. I mean, we all know that. But the pace at which things are changing is just picking up. I'm referring to things like artificial intelligence, but many other things as well. Many, I mean, at every level that you can think of, technology is just rushing ahead. So that, and if you want to be part of a modern economy, you must know that you must understand and be on top of whatever you do in your specific field. You must be on top of that technology. You must be. And related to that is that you must have the necessary skills. So make use of technology and make sure, and I specifically use the word skill and not education, because people quite often think that if you have a piece of paper that you've got a skill as well. That's not necessarily the case. So make sure that if you do get a piece of paper, that there's a specific skill linked to that. And also important, make sure that if you get your skill or qualification, don't think that's the end of the road. If you want to remain relevant, you have to stay relevant. That means you have to keep on polishing up on your skills, make sure that you stay on top of most recent developments. So that is, I think, to keep, as long as you stay safe, look at this amazing weather that we have here, and you've got a good internet connection, a good computer, then you can be anywhere in the world. You can participate in a modern economy, because that's what the world has become. It's become one big integrated global village, if you like. So that's my advice to young people. Never stop learning, and whatever you do, make sure that you stay on top of the most recent things. And perhaps on a slightly philosophical level, to young people, nobody owes you anything. Nothing. I mean, nobody owes you anything. If you want something, go out and go and get it yourself. And perhaps my personal philosophy in life is, I always try to do things that I don't think I will be able to do. And every time that I tried something that I think I won't be able to do, I succeeded in doing that thing. So challenge yourself and try to do stuff that you don't think you can do. And you will be surprised how wrong you can be.
Yeah, it's very inspiring. Thank you. And you know what, Davi, for me, I'm 33 years old now, and I choose to fight, when you consider, making a difference in our country, in the global south. And especially, I've got autistic dyslexic wife, Sammy, who's semi-verbal, and we are supported by our carer, our mother. But we are generally happy. And myself as an autism advocate, I see a gap that I can contribute to. And for me, it's very important, to keep fighting, to fight for what you want, you know.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
maybe can I just add to that?
Yeah.
Right, it sounds very nationalistic and to say I want to change the country and I want to do it for the country and I want to. My approach is a little bit more selfish, and that is your first priority must be with yourself. There's no way you can help anybody else if you don't first help yourself. So you are the most important person in your life, and make sure you look after yourself first.
Yeah. No, if you consider the whole model of I don't want to go into theory, but you consider your own mental health, what you're capable to do, and the support around you, all of those things are very important. These podcasts or these discussions, I usually ask the guests to reintroduce themselves and say the following was I support neurodiversity. And the reason why I'm saying this is because we are now in Autism Awareness and Acceptance Month, where we celebrate the unique differences and the unique contributions of these individuals. We need necessary support, from the general public, and especially public figures like yourself that made a significant impact. So if you may just basically reintroduce yourself with your name and your surname, and then say the following words: I support neurodiversity.
My name is Dawie Rood. I'm an economist in South Africa, and I support people, all kinds of people, everybody. Doesn't matter who you are, what your talents are. Everybody is really special, and there's space for all of us.
Baie dankie, Dawie. Thank you, Dawie. I really appreciate. I want to share